Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has responded firmly at what he termed as Europe's hypocrisy on Russia. Speaking to Austria's national broadcaster ORF on the Russia-Ukraine war, Jaishankar slammed Europe, criticizing India's arms and energy imports from Russia. Even as he reiterated the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to end the conflict in Ukraine, Jaishankar hit out on questions raised over India's oil imports from Russia. The Indian minister pointed out what he called double standards that made Europe's imports from Russia acceptable but painted India's oil needs as criminal.
You know, Europe imported in the same period 6 times the energy which India did.
India's External Affairs Minister also took a dig at China over the India-China border standoff. He pointed out that China had violated bilateral agreements with India on the line of actual control and attempted to change the status quo. There is visible evidence, he said, of China amassing troops near the LAC.
The record is very clear because today, there's a lot of transparency. You have satellite pictures. If you see who moved the forces to the border areas first, I think the record is very clear.
The last India-China clash happened in the Tawang sector in Arunachal Pradesh on the 9th of December. It is the first major clash between the Indian and Chinese armies since the fierce face-off in the Galwan Valley in June of 2020 that marked the most serious military conflict between the two sides in decades. The two countries have held 17 rounds of talks so far to resolve the standoff. To give us more insight, we are being joined by Ambassador Anil Wadhwa. He has worked in the External Affairs Ministry of India. Welcome to WION, sir.
Thank you.
So, in his lashing out at China, what is the bigger message Mr. Jaishankar sends out on India refusing to be bullied?
Well, look, he was pointing out very clearly that we have a series of boundary agreements which have been signed and confidence-building measures which have been carried out to maintain peace and tranquility, while the two sides, India and China, attempt to delineate the boundary through their special representatives. So that process was supposed to have been followed to the T. Now, what happens now is that we have thousands of troops and armaments which continue to be deployed in close proximity, in some places within a few hundred meters of each other. So the chances of an accidental or inadvertent escalation can spiral into a major confrontation, and that remains very high. Now, obviously, he has said, in the context of the important agreements of 1993 and 1996, where the two sides had agreed that they should keep their forces in the areas along the LAC to a minimum level. And of course, the agreements do not define what a minimum level is. But we also have the 96 agreement, which limits the deployment of major categories of armaments, which should not be close to the LAC. And that includes tanks, infantry combat vehicles, guns with 75 mm or bigger caliber, mortars, and various missiles. And also, again, it also limits combat aircraft from flying within 10 kilometers of the LAC. Now, all these have been violated by the Chinese. And this is something which has been brought upon, which situation has been brought upon by the Chinese actions. In response, the Indian side has had to take concrete reciprocal measures.
Sir, I also want your thoughts on what's going on between, I would consider this a certain coaxing from Europe's side towards India. They keep bringing it up. They keep trying to call India's imports of energy from Russia as criminal thing. And I'm reminded of Dr. Jaishankar's quote also that Europe needs to step out of the mindset of saying that the world's problems are not Europe's problems, but Europe's problems are the world's problems. What exactly keeps this debate from being settled? Why is it such a big problem if India keeps not aligning itself in the Russia-Ukraine war and continues its imports?
Well, obviously, as long as Europe keeps importing oil and gas for themselves and energy from Russia, I think it's totally wrong to call out other countries who are doing so.
Right.
And that's why the External Affairs Minister has clearly pointed out, giving specific facts and figures, that what is imported by Europe today is much, much more than what India is doing. Of course, India is also a much poorer country than Europe. It requires to make sure that its population is given cheap energy at the cheapest prices which are available around the world. And the third point that he always makes is that it is a decision of the oil companies to import from any place that they can find cheaper energy. So where is the question of blaming a country like India in this situation? So obviously, when you're doing it yourself, there is no morality here in telling other countries not to do so.
So do you feel this is also a way to coax India to pick a side with Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think the world knows very well where India stands. It has taken its own stand in this conflict, and it has made its stand very clear that what is required is coming to the table and talking about a solution, not continuing with war. We see a number of countries, for example, and the armament companies now trying to fuel the war in order to make profits for themselves. And that is what keeps the war going forward. If these countries take a conscious decision that they should encourage both sides to come to the table, at least sit down together and try and find a solution, then we will not have this continued prolongation of this war.
Thank you so much for those updates, sir. And India has already made it clear it's not the era of war. We'll be in touch for more.